Welcome to Focus on Business, a podcast show for photographers with me, your host, Jane Goodrich. I'm talking to successful photographers so you can learn from our experiences and have the business of your dreams. So join us and let's focus on business. Hi, so welcome to today's episode of Focus on Business podcast. I am so excited, and I know you will be too, to have our fabulous guest, Annemie Tonken. You've probably heard of her, and if you haven't, you will after this podcast, but you should have heard of her because she's a fantastic family photographer and a photography educator and also podcast host. And hi, Annemie.
Oh, thanks, Jane. That's so sweet. What a lovely intro.
Well, you're fantastic, and I love what you're doing for our industry. It's just right up my alley. So I just wanted to thank you for that, and just welcome to our podcast.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here, and all of the above goes right back at you. I really appreciate connecting, in particular, with women who are just doing this very important work to kind of get the industry elevated and make sure that people are building businesses that work so that we can continue to do this out there in the world.
Yeah, continue to take photographs and just do what we love, right?
But yeah, absolutely.
I did a little introduction, but I'd love to hear from you a little bit about what you're doing now, your journey into photography. That would be great.
Yeah. So as you said, I'm a family photographer. I started back in 2010. Like a lot of other photographers out there, photography was not my intended career. I think if you had told 20-year-old me, like, you're going to grow up and be a photographer, I would have laughed and been like, I think you have me confused with someone else. But 10 years after that, when I was 30, I was working toward a master's degree in nursing, actually. So I was in healthcare and had been at that point for 5 or 6 years and was in the process of trying to get this master's degree. I had my second son at that time, and I was just kind of having this crisis of like, what am I doing? I thought nursing was the second career for me. So I was great. I'm on this new path. And then halfway down the path, I was like, I don't think this is it. So I was having this late quarter life crisis or whatever you want to call it. Yeah. And someone suggested to me, you take really great photos. Maybe you could get into photography as a career. And I almost laughed them out of the room. I was just, that's actually not a career. That's just the thing you do for fun. I feel like photography has come a long way since then. I don't think that anyone would laugh at that as a career option, but it got my wheels turning, and I got very distracted by this potential of doing this thing that I loved doing, that I really, could stay up all night figuring out settings or how I could edit this photo. I was doing it fully as an amateur at that point, but here was a giant pile of homework I was supposed to be doing. And instead I'm fiddling with fine tuning that edit of my son. So I started to try and listen to that. And the rest is history. I've now been a family photographer for 14 years. I am based in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. But during those early years, I found it so difficult to get good education, good information. And again, the industry has come a long way. There's a lot more available out there. But I have always really enjoyed teaching. And so when I was in that phase and feeling so frustrated, I kept saying to myself, if I make it through this phase, if I ever get to a place where I know what I'm talking about, maybe I can help other people move past that. So it took 10 plus years for that to come to fruition. But in 2020, I started you'd call it an education platform, but it's called This Can't Be That Hard, named after all those late nights of me, hitting my head against the desk saying, why is this so hard? This can't be that hard. And
it's a great name, by the way.
Oh, thanks. So now I really have leaned into not so much the art side of things, the craft, but I have leaned into the thing that I think has set me apart and made it possible for me to be in business for 14 years, which is really embracing the business side of running a photography business. Just like we are entrepreneurs, in order for us to continue to make our art, we have to sort of accept that. And I have actually fallen in love with the business side of things, because what I have realized is that our creativity and our creative energy doesn't have to be limited to just the art. It can also be poured into our businesses. And so I find, running a business feels a lot like kind of playing a game or doing a puzzle where you're always piecing it together, and it's always changing and the board is always changing. So I love it. I love talking to people about it. And at this point, I love helping other photographers who are such talented artists make a real go of it. So that has been my journey in a nutshell.
That's an amazing story. And I started in 2010 too. So
yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. My background is I did have an MBA in marketing. So I went into it. I'm like, I'm doing a business. And I was lucky in the fact that I had that. And I sort of have the other side of like, if I didn't have that, I don't know how I would start. And I do think nowadays there is a lot of education, but there's also a lot of misinformation. So I think photographers starting now are like, where do I go? Who do I believe? This, that, and the other.
Right.
So once you find the right person, like definitely listen to Annemie's podcast, and this can't be that hard because she's got some great advice. I love what you're doing. And I actually really like what you said about the business side of it and being a puzzle, because even though we all love to create the end result, I actually like creating emails that then I get 3 conversions from and I get 3 bookings from. So I take the same sense of, oh my gosh, they love my work, to like, oh wow, this worked. And it is like a little bit of a game. Or that blog post is now really ranking high. Or like, I think I'm a little too old for the Instagram and Facebook, but when we started, you had the Facebook page that actually got traffic. So that did actually work. But now it's more Facebook groups, and I don't have the energy. And also, when you're 14 years into it, families keep coming back. You're not at that stage where you need to market yourself. But yeah, I definitely think of it as a puzzle. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
You have to sort of also make it a game. Otherwise, you're like, I don't really want to do this.
Well, and I mean, just to sort of take it even a little bit further on the kind of comparison of your business and your photography, if you think about the difference between, I'm going to stand here with my camera up at my eye, with my knees locked, and I'm going to stand 8 feet away from somebody, and there's my frame, and it's very flat. It's very just sort of expected, versus the things that we know to do as photographers. Like, okay, I'm going to get way down low and get this interesting perspective, or I'm going to get way up high and get this interesting perspective, or near or far, or concentrate on a detail, or take it, let's move the light source so it's behind them instead of in front of them, or all these different things that we can do to be creative with our photography. If you apply those kinds of things, okay, great. I need to send emails. Everybody expects me to send an email to say, oh, last week I photographed the such and such family, and this is what happened. And if you would like to sign up for a session with me, here's the link. That's what's expected. That's pretty boring. But like, do the same thing. Get low, get high, get near, get far. Like, how can you pull out one detail from that session and focus on that in a way that really hooks someone's attention? It's the same thing. We have to switch hats. We have to put on a different brain. But ultimately, that creativity is what helps you stand out, whether you're talking about your photos or your business. And so I think that as long as you can sort of remain open to that, I know that that's a big challenge for a lot of photographers, that pays dividends. And just like with your photography, it is a practice. You have to remind yourself, okay, you have to change perspective. You have to put yourself in the shoes of the person who's on the other side. What are they looking for? And when you do that, it starts to click in a much faster way.
Yeah. And if you absolutely really hate it, make sure your prices include enough for you to outsource those things.
Indeed.
So if you were to travel back in time to 2010, when you were up late, supposed to be doing your nursing degree, would you do anything differently about starting your business?
Question. I mean, yes, obviously, like there are 1,000 things that I would do differently, but I really do appreciate the journey and the fact that I feel like it took me a lot longer than some of the people that I have now had the opportunity to coach or work with. It took me a lot longer to kind of wrap my head around some of the finer points. But I do think that I started off with a couple of really good pieces of advice from other people. So I'll just pass those forward, which I always like to do. The first one was a early mentor of mine who told me, if you want to succeed in this business, be sure that you're focused as much on the business side as on the photography side. That was when I signed up for that business course. And like that, that really set me out on the right path. And because of that, I set my prices at the right place from the get-go, which carried me through a lot of rough times. I think if I could have done one thing better, it probably would have been to be a little more open-eyed about systematizing things from the beginning. I think I did a lot of trading dollars for cents or whatever. I was or the opposite of that. I was trying so hard to not spend money in my business because I couldn't. Like I really was on a very shoestring budget for a long time. But what I would do is I would get into that mindset of like, well, I don't need to pay someone else to do that because I can do it myself. And moreover, I didn't know how to hire someone or tell them what I was doing because I didn't really have good systems. It may have still taken me a while to outsource some of the things because of that really tight budget. But I think that if I had gone into it saying, this is my goal is to, as soon as possible, get this off my plate. So I need to have a repeatable system that I can teach to someone when the time comes. And I didn't do that. And so by the time that I actually got there, my mind was blown when I sat down the first time I went to set up a CRM. And I was like, oh, what is my workflow? That exercise, like here I had been running a business for 7 years by many definitions successfully, but I was kind of just winging it. And so anyway.
That's funny because for Pixello that we have that as our ideal client is those who are winging it. It's funny you said that. But yeah, I think even for me, systematizing it. I mean, you're probably the similar time as me. It's like I didn't accept credit cards till 2012. And then it was getting an account person from authorized.net. And it took like 4 days. And that was a game changer to me because I'm not chasing checks. So it's like, oh, cash that where do I put it on my system that they paid? I was like, I'm never accepting anything else. So that one was interesting, like really. And I was lucky because I did get an accountant right away. And so I was like, but mine would be boundaries. I didn't have any boundaries at the beginning. So you're in North Carolina. If you, for some reason, had to move to, let's just say, Nebraska in the next month, in 3 months, you're moving to Nebraska. What would be the first couple of things that you would do?
I would instantly, my business would move to Nebraska today. So all of my social media would switch to Nebraska. I would get my website dialed in as though I were already in Nebraska. So SEO wise, that would be my number one thing. And I actually have a friend who her family is military and she has moved her business 8 times. And she has talked about exactly this. If you can't go to that place and visit and go like scout locations or, figure out that sort of thing ahead of time, go on Google Earth and scout locations or reach out to photographers locally there. And actually, that's another piece of it, like start to try and network with the photographers in that area. But yeah, start blogging about the such and such park in Lincoln, Nebraska that you love to photograph at, which is a little bit of a stretch. Obviously you want to be honest in your marketing. It's not that you would start to get inquiries right away, but as we all know, SEO, that search engine optimization, takes a while. And so if I knew that I was moving in 3 months, I would just instantly move my business in all of the different ways. And then I would start to build business that way.
Yeah, it's an interesting question of what people do. I think it's similar to mine. All the Google, I think that is the number one because I know that's the one that takes the most time, to do. Well, speaking of marketing, what is your favorite form of marketing? I think I know what it is.
I'm curious to know what you think it is.
I can guess. I think I know what it is.
Well, I like to write. And so email has always been, I just enjoy email. Is that what you were going to guess?
That's what I was thinking. Email. You have really good emails. I was thinking she's a really good email writer. I think.
I'm a big believer in email marketing too. I feel like it is one of the most It's like the unsung hero of the marketing world. People are afraid to do it. They're afraid to bother people in their inbox and all that sort of thing. But I have established so many really amazing, true relationships with people via email. So that's number one.
Yeah.
And then really the other piece of that is kind of the same piece of the puzzle. It's those in-person relationships. It's like nobody wants to hear that. They want the easy button. But I think that when you are sort of showing up, whether that is in someone's inbox or at their, wherever it is in person and forming those relationships and end up producing the most work, the easiest work, the best kinds of client relationships. And it's a good place to start.
Yeah. I think also the in-person, it's sort of, I hate the word networking. I think I talk about this all the time. I call it making business friends. And I think, if you're in a pinch, right, and you've built up an email list, you could send an email out to get it, but you can also talk to your business friends and being like, hey, can you send an email on my behalf? Or like, we're partnering together or something like that, because they're your friends now and they know vice versa. You can do the same for them. And so it's like, it becomes, especially with the ones that share your ideal client, and also it's quite lonely. So you do want to meet up with someone for a cup of coffee to just complain about the people in your neighborhood.
Absolutely. Those things, they all go together. And authentic relationships are built on more than like, let's just sit down and talk business, of course. Right. Just like when you have a client, it's more than just straight transactional, or at least the good ones are better than just that. But yeah, I think that in any form of marketing, the number one most important thing to remember is that you want to show up from a place of service where you are there to, every once in a while have somebody who's like, let me just pick your brain about XYZ, and then proceeds to really just be like, let me fire off a bunch of questions and then I'm going to peace out. Bye. And I'm like, what was that? That was not, I just feel like
you gave a free mental session, coaching session.
So I think that remembering especially if you're, asking someone out to coffee because you're hoping to kind of pick their brain, be sure that you're showing up with like, you want to share what's working for you, or how can you serve them in some way?
I go into it with like, how can I help them first? Because I've already done my research of being like, okay, they have their ideal client. It would be great if my goal was for them to share with me on a blog post, right? But I don't go into it with that. I go into it having the conversation. This is where I think a lot of people, if they do model calls or they need content for their website or a blog post, and you're like, that person, try and make sure that you can get that person that is actually going to help your business. So you could get a local business owner and you could feature their store on your blog, but that's a win-win. You've got content. She's a good friend. She's going to refer you. That's where I think is like, I was speaking to someone the other day and they'd done all these model calls. And I was like, yeah, but you could have done a lactation consultant, a doula, a this or that, just to get content on your website. And that would have helped your business more than these model people. So we talk about outsourcing earlier. Do you outsource anything in your photography business?
I outsource everything in my photography business now.
Yeah, me too.
I shouldn't say that. It's not everything.
The shooting of it?
No, I'm still doing the shooting. Yeah, I have gotten to a point where almost the only thing that I am really doing is the photographing. So I have an editor who edits my photos. I have a VA, a virtual assistant, who handles a lot of my email, social media, contacts, whatever. Certainly have the longest thing that I have ever outsourced is my accounting. I don't do any accounting or bookkeeping anymore. That has been a long time coming. I mean, I have done every one of those things in my business. I know how each of those works. It came down to, especially now that I am in this education business and I spend a lot of time doing that, I wanted to continue with photography, but I needed to whittle it down to how can I continue to serve my clients in the important ways, and then, get rid of the rest of it, both from just like a mental clutter side and like a time perspective. So that wasn't a quick switch. It has had its bumps in the road. But at this point, I always like to point to when I have a photography client, a family client, my end to end, the amount of time that I spend working with them and on their session is about 2.5 hours. And that includes my drive time to and from, their house, because I usually shoot on location at people's homes, and the upload and download time, and a couple of interactions. I have a phone call at the beginning that I always do with prospective clients. And then the rest of it is some combination of outsourced and automated. And that allows me to earn a full-time living as a photographer, working 7 hours or 8 hours a week, which is very sustainable.
Yeah. It is very sustainable. And I think we get into this thinking it's just the photography side, and it's really not. It's, 10% is the actual shoot. So the more you can do the money-making part, which I call the money-making, the shoots, and the outsourcing, the editing or culling, or if you love editing, fine. I love the shoots. I absolutely adore the shoots. And that's it. And I don't mind communicating via email and stuff because I've basically got everything automated.
Right.
But other than that, it's you got to figure out a way that you're not doing a million different things and doing them sort of halfway, and outsourcing is that. So you have your photography business and you have your education business. How do you manage your week or your time? How do you do this? Do you have a set
That's a great question.
Or
well, and I also have 2 teenage sons. My schedule does feel like chaos sometimes. I'm just going to be completely honest. I am not one of those people who is going to come to you and be like, I work a grand total of 4 hours a week and the rest of the time I meditate. That's not me. I work a lot. What I am happy to report is that because of that lesson that we talked about earlier about systematizing early, when I started my education business, from the very early days, and it was funny how quickly I reverted to that, I'll just do everything and I don't know what I'm doing. And, it feels like chaos all the time.
Yeah.
But much, much, much more quickly in my education business than in my photography business, I was like, what? I already know this lesson. I have to systematize. I have to automate. So I have built a lot of automation and you rely on a lot of tech in my education business. I also have now a dedicated, almost full-time marketing person, and I have a VA who works many hours a week for me. Plus, I have a podcast editor. Plus. So, there is a team in place there to support me, and I grew that a lot faster with my education business, knowing that it was not going to be possible for me to continue to sustain, what I was doing. So now, what I do in my education business is try and focus on the things that only I can do, and be, make peace with the fact that I can't do it all. And it wouldn't really serve my community if I were trying to do it all.
Right. So, Annemie, we had a quick conversation about editing podcasts before we went live, and you just made me decide that I'm going to outsource from the beginning because why bother? So thank you for this, because
you are welcome.
I've automated all of the other stuff, and now I'm just I can't do it all. So
well, and let me ask you this, because one of the things I was telling you, I edited my podcast for too long. Let me ask you this: do you have a history of audio editing? Is that in your wheelhouse?
No.
So you are going to grind your gears trying to learn how to do that.
Yeah.
And you're not going to do it as well as somebody who can do it in a lot less time.
Oh.
And they really appreciate the, whatever, $30 an hour that you'll pay them in order to get that done. So I wholeheartedly endorse sort of looking at things.
Photographers to outsource all these things. And I'm not doing it myself. But then I'm okay.
Right.
But I needed you to tell me.
We need those reminders. Yeah.
Thank you. So family photography, we know, can be very busy in the fall. How do you cope with the seasonality? Let's put yourself back in, 2013. You're 3 years into it. How would you at that point, or could you cope with the seasonality of it?
Of the photography
business
side, or
the
both?
Photography side.
Yeah. So again, by getting extremely focused in on what only I can do and allowing the rest of it, or finding other people to do the rest of it, I really don't feel a whole lot busier during the busy season anymore because all it means is I'm shooting more. And my shoots, because I'm a family photographer and I'm not doing like day in the life sessions or anything like that, it does mean I have a place to be at a particular time. But again, I have 2 kids, so I'm pretty used to juggling schedules. The capacity increases a little bit, or the sense of busyness increases a little bit. But what's nice is that because my 2 businesses are sort of yin and yang, right?
Yeah.
Most of my audience is busy with their work at the same time that I'm busy with my work.
Right.
So the education kind of takes a little bit of a step back when the photography is busier. And then in my, quiet season for photography, that's when the education stuff really ramps up.
Yeah, because that's interesting because different people cope differently with it. So, my photography business, I have newborns and family. So my newborns kind of deseasonalized it a little bit, but then not enough to sort of, if there was some weird months where that I had 4 babies and I really needed 8. So I actually started a headshot business because in my area, everyone wants a new headshot in January and February because, they didn't get the bonus or they need a new job. And so I found that to work really well. But it's good that your photography education balances your year out, because it also helps with the money side. This is a fun question that I like to ask is, do you have any red flags for clients? And this is photography clients. Does your spidey sense go off?
So I mentioned before that I get on the phone with my clients. I have automated and streamlined and outsourced absolutely everything other than shooting and this one phone call because I find that phone call to be extremely helpful in hearing the red flags, seeing the red flags, and then being able to either, sometimes a red flag can be misleading. Like sometimes a red flag can be taken out of play if you address whatever the issue is right up front. But I have found through many years of error, I'm not even going to call it trial and error, just error, that trying to identify that sort of thing via email just doesn't work for me.
Right.
Having a conversation with someone takes me 10 to 15 minutes. I know exactly what I am there to talk about and educate them on. I'm able to have a little bit of a, like a regular human to human conversation, which I think actually ultimately really helps me book more work. But I'm also able to hear if someone is interested in something that I'm not interested in providing, or if they have a misguided sense of what it's going to cost or anything like that. Again, it's not that if someone initially balks at my pricing that I'm going to write them off.
Right.
It may just be that they don't, this is new to them and they need to be educated a little bit. And I'm just so much more able to kind of read their cues and respond in a tailored, customized way via a human to human phone call versus if I were trying to write an email that kind of took care of everyone's problems. So that's my secret weapon. I don't know. I mean, there's like 1,000 different things that can make someone the wrong client for you. So, and that what's wrong for me may not be wrong for somebody else. So I think that we learn over time what the red flags are for us. But I think that having direct communication with potential clients will not only allow you to recognize and sort of identify those things sooner, but it will also allow you to overcome them in some situations where you wouldn't have been able to if you were relying on email.
Yeah. I have a phone phobia.
Yeah, a lot of people do.
I do. And so it's funny because I wonder if it's just, I got actually very, very good, and it's been doing it for, I can tell via the intake form, like if they'll just say certain things, but like you said, it's like you can follow up with emails and probably should do phone calls, but it's worked for me. It's fine. But you can actually tell, some people are saying, oh, your prices, do you do a discount? And people get offended by that. I'm like, actually, certain cultures are always going to ask that. So don't get offended by it, And it'd be interesting because I think I'd get more information out. Now I'm thinking about that, actually having a phone call with them. Yeah. Where you actually hated your last 7 photographers. Wonder why, you know, like,
What's the common denominator here?
Well, speaking,
I was just going to say, I will say one thing that is a red flag for me with educators in photography and other things is anyone who says like, you do it my way or it's not going to work. And so you saying phone calls, I hate phone calls. I have a phone phobia. I have plenty of things that I recommend and I can give you the reasons why and all that sort of thing. But I also recognize that one of the beautiful things about being in business for yourself is that you are your own boss.
Right.
And I have seen people running businesses literally the opposite way that I run my business who are equally successful. And so I think that it's really important because especially like anyone new to business or new to photography as a business can get really kind of steamrolled into doing things in a particular way that doesn't really align with them. And I'm anti that. I think that is, if you're feeling that feeling,
I love
run away.
I think if you are listening and you're newer and you want to, I think that that's such great advice because even I, after 14 years of running my business and getting told to do IPS, I'm like, I charge $1,500 for a shoot. I'm fine, right? You know, I have a print credit of this. I'm fine. And I don't want to do it. But like if I was new, I would be made to feel that I would want to do it. I mean, I've had a call with this woman, shyer than shyer, barely wanted to talk to me on Zoom. Was like, well, I'm going to do IPS. And I was like, no, you're not. You're really not. You can do it another way. As long as you're profitable, charge whatever way you want to charge it, just as long as you make money. That's my thing. Yeah. It's like, I don't care what you do, what pricing model you have, just make money. Yeah.
And there are many ways to do that. Yeah. So,
exactly. So tell me about the funniest shoot or the worst shoot that you've ever had. I mean, 14 years, you've got to have probably at least 14.
it's definitely more than I care to always remember. I think funny is one thing. I had a family shoot one time and anyone who photographs families at their homes can probably relate to this. Anybody who has a dog, then you go out in the backyard and people are like, oh gosh, I forgot to clean up the dog poop. Like, watch your step. And of course, you're holding a camera. Like, what are you going to do? You can't constantly be watching your feet. You're trying to watch their kids for their funny reactions or whatever. So one time, like within the first 3 minutes that I was at their house, I just stepped straight into it.
Oh my gosh.
And it would have been worse, except that they had 3 kids who were like 4, 7, and 8. And that literally was the most amazing. It's like I couldn't have brought a funnier prop with me than me stepping in dog poop. And then it was just giggles and like silly, and it broke the ice and the parents were laughing. And like after they got over the apology part where I was like, I'm just going to roll with this. Let's keep going. And it turned out to be an amazing shoot. So that was on the like happier side of funny. It was legitimately funny. I think the worst shoots for me are where one parent is really, really not into it. And that can be kind of, I can get any kid, I can make beautiful photos of any child, but man, you get a grouchy adult and that can really, stress everybody out.
Well, and also it's okay if they're toddlers and like one of the parents is not into it. But once they get to like 5, 6 and they sense it, then they become anti it. So I call it my COVID confidence. I got really strict with like my prep emails. I was like, act. Yeah. If there's any teen in your thing, can you act for the 30 minutes? Or like dads, can you pretend that you like it? Because your kids are going to feed off and it's going to make it for a more difficult shoot. Yeah. And so I got very strict and it actually worked. So like, and I'm like, please do not argue in the car on the way here. The kids are going to be scared when they come to the shoot. So please just do not fight.
And I have gotten a lot better. I think the longer that you are in business and the more you recognize that that's not a reflection of you, what ends up happening is that your confidence can break that cycle So you're saying like, oh, your husband is stressed out about this. Great. Well, I'm going to send him an email. Can you give me his email address? And I just sort of address it head on.
Nice.
But owning that and sort of being like, I'm the professional here and you're in my house now, even though I'm in your house.
Well, and that's the
it
thing.
goes a long way.
I think it's also like you are the professional. And like, I like to think of it. Someone had told me this is like, you're the director of this shoot. You're not just the photographer, you're the director. And so I sort of think of myself as a director / teacher because I call it the teacher effect. The kids could be in such a bad mood walking in and then they like me. And so it's like you have to have a role. Like I put my, I call it my shoot hat on. But no. I'm the boss of it. You can stop being grumpy over there, Dad, and you can suck it up. So, yeah. And I will tell
You're
them
in timeout.
But I also, I don't know, I think for sometimes I can think I can get away with it because if I was in England, I couldn't. But like with my English accent in New York, they're like, oh, she sounds so cute. I was like, no, I'm being mean, man.
Right.
I am being sarcastic and mean, and you're going to get in that and do it. But they do it.
Yeah.
So we're going to wrap up here. But before we do, what is the one tip you would give to a new photographer?
Oh, well, hopefully we've covered a few of them. But I think if I had to bring it down to one thing, it would be to systematize. And whatever your systems are, whatever that is. And I always like to remind people, a system is just a series of steps that you repeat in order to achieve a predictable outcome. So you can have systems for everything from the way that you book someone to the way that you communicate with them before a session, all those things. Over time, you will build those systems, but don't just build them, be aware of them, document them, and revisit them from time to time, step by step to see what's working, what's not working, where the bottlenecks are. That process and that attention that you pay to your systems will pay dividends for however many years you're in business.
That is a fantastic tip. If you come out of corporate world, you're sort of used to it. But if you're not and you're new and you haven't really worked where you do systematize and document things and, you're like, I remember I started with my emails. Now I have, templated emails. Why am I sending this again? I'm just going to make a Google template. Even those can be systematized and answers back to when someone's questioning your pricing. You can just have a cut and paste. Here you go, so easy. All right. Thank you. This has been absolutely amazing. I love all your tips, but tell our audience how they can find you.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you. It has been lovely chatting. I can be found everywhere at This Can't Be That Hard. So Instagram, thiscan'tbethathard.com. The podcast is called This Can't Be That Hard. That's where you'll find me. And then we'll also put it in the show notes. But this has been fantastic. And definitely check out. I just get on our email list because you do write funny emails. I do like it. I should respond to you and be like, that's funny. Please do. Yeah. I read all my responses. I always love to be aware of the fact I'm not shouting into the void. So thank you for saying that.
You are not shouting into the void. It's great.